careful. Maya? Expensive floors don't forgive cheap shoes. Sienna Hargrove said it sweetly enough for the reporters to hear, then turned her wrist just enough for the paper cup in her hand to tilt. Hot coffee splashed down the front of Maya Bennett's faded blue dress, spreading across the fabric like a stain everyone had been waiting for. The hallway outside courtroom 12B went silent for half a breath, then filled with whispers, camera clicks, and the soft, cruel laughter of people who had already decided what kind of woman Maya was. She stood frozen under the courthouse lights, one hand gripping the strap of her worn leather bag, the other instinctively rising to the silver butterfly brooch pinned near her collarbone. Sienna gasped, pressing manicured fingers to her lips. "Oh my God, I'm so sorry," she said, her eyes shining with performance. "I forgot you probably only had one dress for court." Maya did not answer. She looked down at the coffee dripping from her dress onto the polished marble floor and felt, for one sharp second, like she was 17 again, standing in a foster home kitchen while someone laughed about how girls built like her should learn to take up less space. Around her, the morning news crews leaned closer, hungry for the image. The chubby former charity accountant, accused of stealing millions from sick children, humiliated before her trial even began. Sienna stood in a cream designer suit, flawless and fragile-looking, the kind of woman strangers wanted to protect. Beside her was Vivian Hargrove, elegant in black, wearing widowhood like a crown. Vivian offered Maya a tissue with a sad little smile. "You should have settled when we gave you the chance." "Dear," she murmured, "courtrooms can be very unkind to girls who confuse pity with power." The doors opened before Maya could move, and a bailiff called the case. Vivian swept inside first, followed by Sienna and a cluster of attorneys whose polished shoes made no sound. Maya walked behind them alone, aware of every damp step, every stair sliding over her body and her stained dress. Courtroom 12B was already packed. Reporters filled the back rows. Board members from the Hargrove Medical Foundation sat together like mourners at a funeral. A few parents from the children's hospital sat near the aisle, and their faces tight with anger because they had been told Maya was the reason treatments had been delayed. Grants had vanished, and hope had been stolen. When Maya reached the defense table, there was only one chair waiting for her. No family, no famous lawyer, no fiancé, no one to whisper, "You're not alone." Across the aisle, Caleb Sterling adjusted his navy tie and refused to meet her eyes. Judge Eleanor Graves entered with the calm authority of a woman who had seen every form of greed dressed up as tragedy. Everyone rose. Maya stood a moment too late, because her fingers had caught on the clasp of the butterfly brooch. The judge noticed. So did the room. Pity crossed Judge Graves's face before she could hide it. And somehow that wounded Maya more than Sienna's laughter. The judge saw the stained dress, the trembling hands, the empty defense table, and perhaps she saw a desperate young woman about to be crushed by a family with old money and better lawyers. "Miss Bennett," Judge Graves said after everyone sat, her voice measured but not unkind. "Before we proceed, I want to confirm that you have chosen to represent yourself today, given the seriousness of the allegations. The court can appoint counsel or grant additional time." A murmur moved through the room, soft and humiliating. Maya knew what they heard beneath the judge's words. Poor thing. She does not understand what is about to happen to her. The lead attorney for the Hargrove family, Martin Voss, rose before Maya could respond. Your Honor, while we respect the defendant's circumstances, the victims in this matter deserve timely justice. The Foundation has already suffered catastrophic reputational damage, and the children whose funds were diverted cannot wait for Miss Sue. Bennett to invent another delay. He turned slightly, letting the jury see his profile and the controlled disgust on his face. We intend to show that Miss Bennett abused the trust of a grieving family, manipulated the late Charles Hargrove in his declining months, and attempted to position herself as an heir by stealing private documents from the Foundation archives. The first exhibit appeared on the courtroom screen, a grainy security image of Maya entering the records floor late at night. Her stomach tightened, not because she had never seen the image, but because she knew what had been cut out of it. The original video would have shown Charles Hargrove beside her, leaning on his cane, asking her to help him retrieve files he no longer trusted his own staff to handle. But in this version, Charles was gone. Maya stood alone, caught mid-step, her body made bulky by the camera angle, and her oversized cardigan. Voss paced slowly. Here is the accused, entering a restricted archive at 1142 p.m. Here are forged messages sent to Mr. Hargrove, pressuring him to alter his will. And here, he clicked again, is the transfer of $12 million from a pediatric care reserve into accounts opened under Ms. Prowse. Bennett's identifying information. Gasps rose behind her like a wave. Maya kept her eyes on the screen, while her throat burned. $12 million. Sick children. Forged messages. Restricted archive. Every phrase was designed to build a cage around her before she could speak. Voss turned to her with theatrical restraint. Ms. Bennett was not a senior executive. She was not family. She was a junior accountant hired through a hardship employment program after Mr. Hargrove, known for his generosity, took personal interest in her background. He paused just long enough for the word hardship to do its work. That kindness was repaid with obsession. Sienna lowered her head in the front row, shoulders shaking as if she were crying. Vivian placed a comforting arm around her daughter. The reporters wrote quickly. Maya saw a hospital mother in the second row wipe tears from her cheeks. Not for Maya, but because she believed Maya had stolen from her child. Then Sienna took the stand. She moved like a woman stepping onto a stage built for sympathy. Her pale face lifted toward the judge, her voice small enough to sound wounded, but clear enough to carry. At first, I felt sorry for her, Sienna said, glancing at Maya with damp eyes. Maya always seemed lonely. My father was kind to lonely people. But then she started copying me, asking about my clothes, my schedule, my family history. She told people she understood my father better than we did. Was? I found her in my mother's study holding an old photograph, and she said, "Some daughters are chosen, not born." The lie landed beautifully. Someone in the gallery whispered, "That's sick." Maya's hand closed around the edge of the table until her nails hurt. She remembered that photograph. It had been of her mother, Rose Bennett, standing beside Charles Hargrove 30 years ago. Voss asked Sienna if Maya had ever threatened her. Sienna hesitated with perfect timing. "Not directly," she said, letting her voice crack. "But she told me that people like me always get erased eventually. I didn't understand what she meant until after Daddy died. and we found out someone had tried to remove my mother and me from the estate documents. Vivian bowed her head. Caleb looked at the table. Maya stared at him, begging him silently to look up, to remember the night she had shown him the irregular accounts, the missing files, the fear in Charles's voice. He had held her then. He had said, "I believe you, Maya. Whatever happens, I'll stand with you." Now, he sat beside the people who had framed her, wearing the watch Vivian had given him after he joined the family's legal team. When Caleb was called, the air left Maya's chest, so suddenly she almost reached for the chair. He walked to the stand without looking at her, raised his right hand, and swore to tell the truth. Voss softened his tone, as if handling a painful subject. "Mr. Sterling, you had a personal relationship with Miss Bennett." "Correct." Caleb's jaw tightened. "Yes." Voss nodded. "Did that relationship end because you discovered her interest in the Hargrove estate?" Caleb closed his eyes for half a second, and Maya saw the man she had loved, trapped somewhere inside the man speaking against her. Then he opened them and chose. It ended because Maya became fixated on the Hargrove name. He said, "She asked me more than once whether marriage could protect her if the family challenged her claim. At the time, I thought she was insecure. Later, I realized she was planning something." The room changed after that. Maya felt it happen. Before Caleb spoke, some people had doubted her. After Caleb, they despised her. Betrayal from a stranger could be argued with. Betrayal from a man who had once kissed the scar on her wrist and called it proof she survived was harder to fight. Voss displayed private texts next. Messages supposedly from Maya to Caleb. "If Charles dies before he signs, I need another way in. And Sienna doesn't deserve what should have been mine." Maya had never written them. She knew. Caleb knew that too. Her lips parted, but no sound came out. Judge Graves studied her over her glasses, and that pity returned. Deeper now, almost sorrowful. It was the look people gave a woman they believed had ruined herself, trying to become someone else. "Ms. Bennett," Judge Graves said after Voss returned to his table, "the evidence presented is substantial. I must again ask whether you wish to request counsel before responding." Maya slowly stood. The coffee stain had dried stiff against her dress. Her knees trembled beneath the table, but her hands were steady when she unpinned the silver butterfly brooch and placed it before her. Sienna's mouth curved in a faint smile, as if Maya had finally brought out some sentimental trinket for pity. Caleb's face changed, just slightly, when he saw it. Not fear yet, recognition. Maya looked at Vivian, then at Sienna, then at the judge, who had mistaken loneliness for weakness. "No, Your Honor," she said, her voice quiet enough that the room leaned in. "I don't need more time. I just needed them to finish lying under oath first." 2 years earlier, Maya Bennett had entered the Hargrove Medical Foundation through the service elevator because the front desk had not believed she was there for an interview. She still remembered the receptionist's eyes dropping to her thrift store blazer. Then, to the scuffed flats she had polished with cooking oil because she could not afford shoe cleaner. The foundation occupied 4 floors of glass and white marble above Michigan Avenue, with photographs of smiling children on every wall, and the Hargrove name carved in silver behind the main desk. Maya had expected to be invisible there. just another hardship. Higher, tucked into a cubicle, no one visited. But she was good with numbers. Better than good. Numbers did not care about her weight, her dress size, or whether she had grown up aging out of homes where adults called her sweet only when they needed free babysitting. Numbers told the truth when people did not. And within 3 months, the numbers began whispering that something inside the foundation was rotten. The first irregularity was small enough for someone else to ignore a pediatric transport grant, marked as paid to a rural clinic, that had closed 6 months earlier. Maya checked the routing number, expecting a clerical error, and found a shell company with a mailing address in Delaware. Then another transfer appeared, hidden under equipment, reimbursements. Then another under emergency surgery, sponsorships. By midnight, her cubicle lamp was the only light still burning on the accounting floor. And Maya sat with cold coffee and a notebook full of figures that made her stomach tighten. $12 million had not vanished all at once. It had been bled out carefully, patiently, in amounts small enough to look like mercy. When she brought the file to Grant Mercer, the Foundation's CFO, he smiled at her like she was a child who had found a shadow and called it a monster. Ambition is good. Maya? He said, closing the folder without opening it. But paranoia makes poor people look dangerous. She should have let it go then. A smarter woman, or at least a safer one, might have swallowed the insult and returned to her desk. But 2 nights later, Charles Hargrove himself appeared beside her cubicle, leaning on a black cane, his silver hair combed neatly back, his face thinner than the portraits in the lobby. "You're the young woman asking questions about the Eastbourne accounts," he said. Maya stood so quickly her chair bumped the wall. She expected anger. Instead, Charles looked tired, almost afraid. He led her to a private conference room, locked the door, and listened while she explained every missing grant and false invoice. He did not interrupt once. At the end, he asked only one question, and it had nothing to do with money. His eyes had fixed on the silver butterfly brooch pinned to Maya's cardigan. "Where did you get that?" he whispered. Maya touched it protectively. "It was my mother's. Rose Bennett." Something in Charles broke when she said the name. His hand tightened around the cane until his knuckles whitened. And for a moment, Maya thought he might collapse. He asked her mother's birthday, the town where she had lived, the year Maya was born. Each answer made him paler. Before that night, Maya had known Charles only as the billionaire whose face hung in hospital wings and annual reports. After that night, he began calling her to his office under the excuse of financial reviews. But he asked questions no employer should have cared about: whether she had been happy as a child, whether Rose had ever spoken of Chicago, whether anyone had kept old letters. Maya did not understand the grief in his eyes. She only knew that for the first time in her life, an older man looked at her without impatience or appetite or pity. He looked at her as if he had misplaced something precious and feared he had found it too late. Caleb Sterling entered her life during those months like a door opening in a room with no windows. He was not yet the Hargrove family's favorite attorney then, only an ambitious associate assigned to compliance. Handsome, in a controlled, careful way, with rolled sleeves and kind eyes that made Maya lower her guard before she meant to. He found her crying once in the parking garage after Grant humiliated her in front of the finance team, calling her a charity case, auditing charity. Caleb said nothing at first. He simply stood beside her until she wiped her face and apologized for being embarrassing. "You're not embarrassing," he said. "You're exhausted from being brave in a building full of cowards." It was exactly the sentence Maya had waited her whole life to hear. Later, when he kissed her outside a 24-hour diner after reviewing documents until dawn, she believed him when he said, "Whatever this turns into, I'm with you." Then Sienna came home from New York. She arrived at the foundation gala in champagne silk, thin as a blade and bright as a camera flash, with Vivian's hand resting proudly at the small of her back. The room adored her before she spoke. Sienna knew how to make beauty look like innocence, and innocence look like injury. At first, she was charming to Maya, calling her daddy's little accounting angel with a laugh that made the words sound affectionate until Maya heard the edge beneath them. A week later, rumors began drifting through the office. Maya was spending too much time with Charles. Maya was trying to turn an old man against his family. Maya had copied Sienna's hairstyle, though Maya had only tied her hair back because the office air conditioning had failed. At lunch, conversations stopped when she approached. In the elevator, Vivian touched Maya's arm and said softly, "Lonely girls sometimes mistake kindness for invitation. Be careful not to embarrass yourself." The trap tightened with such elegance that Maya almost admired it. Sienna cried to Caleb that Maya had been following her. Vivian told the board Charles was becoming confused and vulnerable. Grant reassigned Maya's system access, then accused her of trying to bypass restrictions. When Maya showed Caleb the missing funds, his first response was still outrage on her behalf. But fear had entered him. He warned her that accusing Vivian Hargrove without airtight proof could destroy them both. "Not us," Maya had said, because she still believed in that word. "The truth will protect us." Caleb had kissed her forehead, but his arms felt different around her, less like shelter than apology. A month later, he began missing their late-night calls. Then he appeared in a photograph beside Sienna at a donor dinner, his hand on her chair, his smile polished for the world. The night Charles died, Maya was in the hospital elevator with him, holding a folder he had insisted on retrieving from a private archive. He looked weaker than usual, sweat shining at his temple. But his mind was sharp. "If anything happens before Monday," he told her, pressing a small brass key into her palm, "trust the butterfly, not the family." Before Maya could ask what he meant, the elevator doors opened, and Olivia Chen, Charles's private night nurse, hurried toward them. Olivia was small, stern, and honest in the way tired nurses often were. Too busy for lies. She helped Charles back to his room, while Maya waited outside with the folder clutched to her chest. Vivian arrived 20 minutes later, furious beneath her perfume, and ordered Maya removed from the private wing. By morning, Charles Hargrove was dead. By evening, the folder was missing. Maya's badge was deactivated, and Grant Mercer was telling police she had accessed restricted records the night of Charles's death. Back in courtroom 12B, Olivia Chen took the stand with deep shadows beneath her eyes. Maya leaned forward, hope painful in her chest. Olivia had seen Vivian enter Charles's room after the monitors were recalibrated. Olivia had called Maya 2 days after the funeral, voice shaking, and said, "They're lying about the timeline. Now, under oath, Olivia folded her hands so tightly, her fingers seemed bloodless. Voss asked whether she had witnessed anything suspicious the night Charles Hargrove died. Olivia's gaze flickered toward Vivian. Then to a man in the back row Maya did not recognize. A man holding a phone with a child's photo on the screen. "No," Olivia said, barely audible. "Mr. Hargrove was resting when I last checked. I don't remember anything unusual." Maya felt the last bridge beneath her burn. Olivia's eyes filled with tears. But she did not change her answer. During the recess, Maya sat alone on a bench outside the courtroom while people flowed around her like she was a spill. No one wanted to step in. Sienna passed with Caleb at her side and paused just long enough to whisper, "Even your friends know when to stop ruining themselves for you." Caleb did not laugh, but he did not defend her either. That silence was worse. Maya stared at the floor until a shadow fell across her knees. Daniel Price, the youngest attorney at the Hargrove table, stood there, holding a stack of exhibits. He did not look at her directly. One page slipped from his folder and landed near her shoe. When Maya bent to pick it up, she saw a sentence written in blue ink across the margin, and they changed the server time. "Ask for the backup logs." By the time she looked up, Daniel was already walking away, his face blank. That afternoon, Judge Graves allowed the prosecution to expand its review into potential criminal charges. The words struck the room like a gavel before the gavel fell. Maya heard fraud, evidence tampering, and flight risk. Each phrase making her future smaller. Vivian lowered her lashes, as if in prayer. Sienna leaned into Caleb's shoulder, victorious in the shape of grief. When court adjourned, reporters surged toward the doors, already shouting questions about stolen children's funds and forged wills. Maya escaped through a side exit into cold rain, walking 6 blocks because she could not afford a rideshare and had forgotten where she parked. At her apartment building, yellow tape crossed her door. A notice declared the unit sealed pending investigation. Through the window, she could see her mother's old suitcase open on the floor, its contents spilled by strangers. Maya stood in the rain, with nowhere to go. One hand closed around the brass key Charles had given her, and for the first time that day, she began to cry. Maya spent the night in her 12-year-old Honda behind the Harold Washington Library, wrapped in the only coat the investigators had not taken because she had been wearing it when they sealed her apartment. Rain ticked against the windshield until dawn, blurring the city lights into long, trembling lines. Every few hours, she woke from shallow sleep, with her hand clenched around the brass key Charles had given her, afraid that even dreams might steal it. Her phone had 43 unread messages. None from friends. Most were unknown numbers, calling her a thief, a monster, a woman who had stolen medicine from dying children. One message had a photo of her coffee-stained dress beside the words, "This is what guilt looks like." Maya turned the phone face down and stared at the silver butterfly brooch in her palm. Trust the butterfly, not the family, Charles had said. At the time, it sounded like fever. Now, it sounded like a map. When the library opened, Maya washed her face in the restroom sink and avoided looking at the mirror for too long. Her hair had dried unevenly. Her eyes were swollen, and the coffee stain still marked her dress, like evidence of a crime no one had committed But everyone had enjoyed. She took a public computer near the back, logged into an old cloud folder under a name she had not used since college, and began searching for the backup logs Daniel had hinted at. The Foundation's main server records had already been submitted to court, polished and fatal, showing Maya's credentials accessing the transfer system at 1158 p.m. the night Charles died. But the hospital wing had a separate emergency backup system for compliance, one that mirrored access activity every 15 minutes. Maya's pulse quickened when she found the archive directory. The file was buried under pediatric equipment audits. Mislabeled and nearly forgotten, numbers did not care who had money. Numbers still told the truth. The backup log opened in a plain gray window, and for a moment, Maya could not breathe. Her credentials had been used at 1158 p.m. Yes, but from an executive terminal on the 31st floor. At that exact time, the hospital elevator camera showed Maya with Charles on the pediatric wing, 9 floors below, holding a folder while he leaned heavily on his cane. She downloaded the clip with shaking fingers and watched it 3 times. In the video, Charles touched the butterfly brooch on her cardigan and said something the camera could not record. Maya remembered the words, "Now Rose wore it when she left me." A strange coldness moved through her. Charles had known her mother, not as an employee, not as a rumor, as someone who had mattered enough to break his voice 30 years later. Maya copied the logs, the elevator timestamp, and the access trail onto 3 separate drives. Then emailed encrypted copies to an address she had created that morning. By noon, Vivian Hargrove had turned the courthouse steps into a stage. Maya watched the live stream from the library, with headphones pressed tight over her ears. Vivian stood beneath a line of microphones in a black dress. Sienna beside her, pale and beautiful. Caleb slightly behind them, with his hands folded like a man attending a funeral. This is not about revenge, Vivian told the cameras, tears bright but obedient in her eyes. This is about children who trusted our foundation, children whose surgeries, treatments, and futures were threatened by someone my husband tried to help. Sienna lowered her face as if the pain were too much. Then she looked up and spoke directly into the camera. Body shaming is wrong. Cruelty is wrong. But being hurt in life does not give anyone the right to hurt children. The comment section exploded. Maya closed the browser when her own name began appearing beside words like evil. Frau. En prison. Monster. A phone rang 5 minutes later. Caleb's name filled the screen. And for 1 weak second, her thumb hovered as if the past could still be answered. She picked up without speaking. Caleb exhaled. Maya. Listen carefully. The family is willing to offer a settlement before this becomes federal. His voice was lower than it had been in court. Almost human. And that made it worse. You plead to mishandling records. Return any documents you took. Leave Chicago. And Vivian won't push for the maximum charges. Maya looked around the library. At students. Job seekers. Old men. Reading newspapers. People with ordinary lives, untouched by families who could erase them. You mean I confess to a crime you know I didn't commit? She said. Silence stretched. Caleb's answer came softly. I mean you survive. Maya laughed once. Without humor. No. Salib. You mean I disappear before I find what Charles left me? His tone changed then. The warmth drained out, leaving the lawyer Vivian had purchased. "You always do this," he said. "You mistake suspicion for importance. Charles felt sorry for you. I felt sorry for you. That doesn't make you family." Maya closed her eyes, and the words struck precisely where he intended. He knew the old wound, the one carved by every foster mother who told her not to eat too much, every school picture where she stood at the edge, every boyfriend who liked her in secret but never in public. "No one is going to choose you over Sienna," Caleb continued. "Not in court. Not in life. Take the deal before your pride buries you." Maya opened her eyes and looked at the butterfly brooch beside the keyboard. "My pride isn't what you should be afraid of," she said. "Your oath is." Then she ended the call. The brass key did not fit any lock Maya owned, but the butterfly brooch had always had a tiny seam along its back. As a child, she had assumed it was damage. Another broken thing her mother had kept, because poor people learned to love what remained. Now she held it beneath the library desk lamp and pressed the key's narrow edge into the seam. Nothing happened at first. Then she remembered Charles, asking her mother's birthday. Rose Bennett. April 17. Maya pressed the left wing 4 times. The right wing once. Then the body 7 times. The brooch clicked open with a sound so small it felt louder than the courthouse gavel. Inside was a micro SD card, no bigger than a fingernail, and a folded strip of paper browned with age. On it were 4 words in handwriting. Maya knew from birthday cards her mother had never mailed. If he forgets. Remember. Maya borrowed an adapter from the library media desk, with hands she could barely steady. The card contained 3 folders. The first held scanned documents, a marriage certificate between Charles Edward Hargrove and Rose Marie Bennett, dated 28 years earlier, filed in a small county courthouse in Indiana. The second held a DNA report listing Charles as the biological father of Maya Rose Bennett with 998% probability. The third folder contained only 1 audio file labeled, "If they bring her to court." Maya did not play it immediately. She sat frozen, reading her mother's name beside Charles's again and again until the letters blurred. Her whole life, she had believed she was the daughter of a woman abandoned by some nameless man who had never cared enough to appear. But Charles had not been nameless. He had been everywhere, in hospital wings, in newspaper articles, in the foundation lobby, where Maya walked past his portrait every day without knowing she had his eyes. The brass key led her to a private vault at Lakefront Trust Bank, where the manager's smile faltered the moment she saw the name attached to the box M. B. H. Maya Bennett Hargrove. The room they gave her was small, sealer, and cold enough to make her fingers stiff. Inside the box lay a sealed envelope, a black recording pen, a notarized will, medical files, photographs of Rose and Charles, together, and a letter addressed in Charles's careful hand, "My daughter, if you are reading this." And then I was too late to protect you publicly. Maya pressed the letter to her mouth and made no sound, because grief in that room felt too large to release. The will named Maya as Charles's legal heir and successor to the foundation chair. The medical files showed unexplained sedatives in his blood during the week before his death. The recording pen had a date engraved on its side the night before Charles died. When Maya left the bank, the city seemed too bright, too loud, too ordinary for a world that had just split open beneath her. She placed the documents in her bag, the brooch back on her dress, and the recording pen inside her coat pocket. For the first time since the trial began, she did not feel like a woman running from a machine built to crush her. She felt like the last locked door had opened, and behind it stood every ghost Vivian had buried. Then she saw Caleb across the street, beside a black town car. He was not looking at her face. He was looking at the bank envelope in her hand. His phone was already pressed to his ear, his expression pale and sharp with fear. Maya did not cross toward him. She only lifted her chin, turned away, and walked toward the courthouse, while behind her Caleb said into the phone, "Vivian, we have a problem." By the next morning, courtroom 12B felt less like a place of law than a theater built for Maya Bennett's execution. Reporters packed the back rows until the bailiff had to block the doors. Vivian Hargrove sat in the front with her hands folded, her face composed into the soft sorrow of a widow forced to punish someone she had once helped. Sienna wore pale blue today, innocent and luminous, dabbing beneath her eyes before the cameras could catch her smiling. Caleb stood at the prosecution table, rigid in a charcoal suit. But Maya saw the difference immediately. His confidence had cracks in it now. He watched her bag, her hands, the silver butterfly brooch pinned back on her dress. Judge Graves entered, and everyone rose. When Maya sat, Vivian leaned slightly toward her and whispered without moving her lips, "Whatever you think you found, dear, remember that poor girls look unstable when they try to sound powerful." Martin Voss rose first. Asking the court to exclude any surprise materials Maya might attempt to introduce, his voice carried the polished outrage of a man protecting justice from inconvenience. "Your Honor, Miss Bennett has repeatedly hinted at documents she cannot authenticate, recordings she cannot verify, and personal fantasies about her connection to the Hargrove family. This court cannot become a stage for delusion." A few people in the gallery nodded. Judge Graves looked toward Maya. And again, Maya saw that faint shadow of pity, but it was thinner today, touched by curiosity. Before Maya could respond, Daniel Price stood from the Hargrove legal table. The movement was small, but the courtroom felt it. Caleb turned sharply. Vivian's face did not change, but one hand closed around her purse clasp. Daniel cleared his throat and said, "Your Honor, for the record, backup server logs were subpoenaed and submitted to Chambers last week. They are not surprise materials." The silence that followed was almost beautiful. Voss stared at Daniel, as if the young attorney had spoken in another language. Caleb's mouth tightened. Sienna stopped dabbing her eyes. Judge Graves adjusted her glasses and looked down at the file before her. "Mr. Price," she said slowly, "are you informing the court that the Hargrove Medical Foundation's mirrored compliance logs differ from the records already entered?" Daniel swallowed, but his voice held. "Yes, Your Honor. The mirrored logs show an executive terminal accessing the transfer system at 1158 p.m. The defendant's credentials were used, but the physical location was not hers. Hospital elevator footage places Ms. Longan Bennett with Charles Hargrove on the pediatric wing at the same time. Maya did not look at Vivian. She wanted to, but she had waited too long for this moment to waste it on satisfaction. She watched the judge instead. Watched pity turn into attention. The first video played on the courtroom screen. Maya appeared in the elevator beside Charles, his hand trembling on his cane, her arm hovering near him without touching because he hated being treated as fragile. The timestamp burned white in the corner. 1:15:8 p.m. Judge Graves leaned forward. Voss objected, but the judge overruled him before he finished. Then the server log appeared beside the video, showing Maya's login from an executive office terminal 31 floors above the hospital wing. A murmur rolled through the gallery, different from yesterday's whispers. This one did not mock Maya. It questioned everyone else. Voss tried to recover, arguing that credentials could be shared, that Maya might have arranged remote access. Maya stood and asked permission to display the next exhibit. The screen changed to a hallway camera from the archive floor. A figure in Maya's oversized cardigan and knit hat entered the restricted records room. Then the figure turned slightly, and under the fluorescent light, a diamond bracelet flashed on her wrist. Sienna's hand flew to her own bracelet before she could stop herself. The courtroom saw it. Maya let the image freeze there. The bracelet enlarged until every diamond looked like a tiny accusation. That bracelet was a custom birthday gift from Vivian Hargrove to Sienna, Maya said, her voice steady, though her heart pounded. There are only 2 in existence. The second is in a safe deposit box. Unvorn, according to the jeweler's insurance certificate. Voss objected again, louder this time. But Judge Graves asked whether Maya had documentation. Maya handed the certificate to the bailiff. Sienna began to cry. Not delicately now, but with the sharp panic of someone whose beauty had failed to protect her. I borrowed that cardigan because I was cold, she said. I went to look for Daddy's letters. Maya told me to go there. Caleb lowered his eyes. Maya turned to him. Then perhaps Mr. Sterling can explain why the forged text messages were created from his office computer 3 hours later. Caleb looked up as if she had struck him. Maya submitted the metadata report Daniel had helped secure, tracing the fabricated messages to a device registered under Caleb's legal credentials. The judge's face hardened. Caleb stood halfway, then sat when Voss gripped his sleeve. This is being twisted, Caleb said, but his voice lacked the old cruelty. Maya remembered him in the parking garage, calling her brave. She remembered him in court, calling her obsessed. Both men had worn the same face. No, Maya said softly. Not to him alone, but to the whole room. I was twisted. My words, my work, my loneliness, my body, my grief. All of it was bent into something ugly enough for you to sell. Judge Graves warned her to remain focused on evidence. But her tone was not unkind now. Maya nodded and reached into her bag for the black recording pen Charles had left behind. Vivian rose before Maya could speak. Your Honor, this is outrageous. That item has not been verified, and my late husband was medicated, confused, and vulnerable in his final days. For the first time, her mask slipped enough for the room to glimpse fear beneath the pearls. Maya looked at her calmly. That is exactly why the toxicology report matters. The medical file passed from Maya to the bailiff to the judge. It showed sedatives administered without proper notation during the week Charles attempted to revise his estate documents. Then Maya requested to play the audio file from the pen, recorded the night before Charles died. Judge Graves allowed it with a warning that its admissibility would be reviewed. But the first voice that filled the courtroom made review feel almost unnecessary. It was Charles. Weak, but clear. If Maya is brought to court, play everything. They will call her unstable because they cannot call her untrue. Then came Vivian's voice, crisp and furious. Recorded from somewhere inside Charles's study, the fat little orphan will be easier to blame. People already want to believe desperation when they see it. The courtroom seemed to stop breathing. Sienna's voice followed, younger and crueler. If she goes to prison, no one will care what Daddy promised her. Grant Mercer spoke next, explaining the shell companies, the altered server times, the accounts opened under Maya's identifying information. Caleb's voice came last, quieter than the others, but unmistakable. I can make the texts look emotional, not financial. She was in love with me. They'll believe obsession. Maya stared at the table while the recording played. She did not want the room to see her cry. Not because she was ashamed of tears, but because she refused to let Caleb mistake them for a door back into her heart. When the audio ended, no one moved. The judge's face had gone pale, with controlled anger. Vivian whispered. Charles was confused, but the words were useless now. Falling into a room that had already heard her truth, Maya placed the final documents before the court, the marriage certificate of Charles Hargrove and Rose Bennett, the DNA report, and the notarized will naming Maya Rose Bennett Hargrove as his daughter and lawful successor to the foundation chair. The name traveled through the courtroom like thunder. Maya Rose Bennett Hargrove. Sienna stood so violently her chair scraped the floor. No, she shouted. She's nobody. She's a charity case. She's not his daughter. Judge Graves struck the gavel once, hard enough to silence even the reporters. Vivian sank slowly into her chair, not fainting, not crying, simply aging 10 years in front of everyone. Judge Graves ordered the Hargrove Foundation's contested assets frozen pending review, referred the audio and financial records to the district attorney, and instructed court officers to prevent Grant Mercer from leaving the building. Grant bolted anyway, making it only 3 steps before 2 officers caught him near the aisle. Cameras flashed despite the bailiff's warning. Caleb remained seated, staring at nothing, his career collapsing invisibly before the handcuffs ever came. Judge Graves turned to Maya, and this time there was no pity in her eyes. There was respect, and something close to apology. Ms. Bennett, she said. The court will recess to review these materials immediately. Maya nodded, then looked across the aisle at Vivian, Sienna, Caleb, and every person who had laughed when coffee stained her dress. You were right about one thing, she said quietly. I never belonged in your family. I belonged to the truth you buried. 3 weeks after the recording played in courtroom 12B, Chicago learned how expensive a lie could become when spoken under oath. Vivian Hargrove was indicted on charges of fraud, conspiracy, evidence tampering, and obstruction. Grant Mercer, who had spent years moving children's medical funds through shell companies with names like Mercy and Hope, agreed to cooperate. Only after prosecutors showed him the full audit Maya had prepared before Charles died. His confession pulled 3 board members, 2 private bankers, and 1 hospital administrator into the investigation. Sienna disappeared from charity magazines first, then from brand campaigns. Then, from the society pages that had once treated her tears as newsworthy, every photo of her in designer gowns became evidence of money stolen from children's surgeries. Caleb Sterling was suspended from practice, pending a disciplinary hearing. His name removed from the firm website so quickly, it looked as if he had never existed. Maya did not celebrate any of it. People expected her to, perhaps because they thought revenge should look like champagne and smiles. But the first morning, she entered Charles Hargrove's old office as interim chair of the foundation. She stood behind his desk and felt only the terrifying weight of all that had been stolen. Sunlight cut through the windows, falling across photographs of children whose grants had been delayed, while Vivian hosted galas beneath crystal chandeliers. Maya placed her mother's butterfly brooch beside Charles's fountain pen and opened the first restored fund request. A 6-year-old in Milwaukee needed emergency cardiac transport. A teenager in Detroit needed a clinical trial deposit. A mother in Peoria had written, "Please, don't let my son become paperwork." Maya approved the requests herself, on Biwan, until her signature stopped shaking. Power, she realized, had not healed pain. Used correctly, it prevented pain from spreading. The courthouse hallway looked different the day Caleb found her there after his disciplinary hearing. No cameras waited this time. No one laughed at her dress. Maya wore a simple gray suit that fit her properly, tailored by a woman who had said, "Clothes should respect the body living inside them." Caleb stood near the marble column where Sienna had spilled coffee on her weeks earlier. He looked thinner, older, stripped of the polished confidence that had once made rooms open for him. "Maya," he said, and her name sounded like something he had no right to touch. She stopped because running from him would have given him too much power. He took one step closer, then halted when he saw her face. "I told myself I was trapped," he said. "Vivian had leverage. Sienna did. The firm pressured me, but I know that doesn't excuse what I did." "No," Maya said quietly. "It doesn't." Caleb's eyes reddened. He reached into his coat and pulled out the engagement ring she had once returned to him in a paper envelope because she could not bear to throw it away. "I loved you," he said. "I know that sounds worthless now, but I did. I was weak, and I was afraid of losing everything I thought I'd earned. By the time I understood what they were doing, I had already become part of it." Maya looked at the ring, remembering the night he gave it to her outside, a diner at 2 a.m. When they were too tired to pretend and poor enough to believe love could survive without permission. She had loved him then. That truth still lived somewhere inside her. But not as a door, only as a scar. "You didn't lose me in court, Caleb," she said. "You lost me the first time they laughed at me, and you stayed silent." He flinched, as if the sentence had landed harder than any ruling. "Can I ever make it right?" he asked. Maya studied him for a long moment. Not cruelly, not tenderly, but with the clear-eyed distance of a woman who had finally stopped begging to be chosen. "You can tell the truth without being cornered first," she said. "You can testify against Vivian without bargaining for pity. You can spend the rest of your life remembering that betrayal doesn't become smaller because you were scared." Caleb nodded, tears slipping down his face. He offered the ring again. Not as a proposal now, but as surrender. Maya took it, walked to the trash bin beside the courthouse security desk, and dropped it inside. The sound was tiny, almost disappointing. Freedom often was. It did not roar. It simply ended the argument. Judge Eleanor Graves asked to see Maya before the final asset hearing concluded. The courtroom was empty when Maya entered. The benches quiet. The witness stand polished. And still, Judge Graves stood near the window without her robe, looking less like an institution and more like a woman who had carried too many human failures home at night. "Ms. Bennett," she said, "I have been on this bench for 22 years. I pride myself on reading evidence, not faces. Yet when you first stood here, I saw a lonely young woman and mistook that loneliness for helplessness. Maya did not know what answer the judge expected, so she gave the truth. Most people do." Judge Graves turned, pain flickering across her stern features. This court nearly allowed powerful people to turn public pity into another weapon. "I am sorry." Maya breathed in slowly. She had waited her whole life for apologies that never came. This one did not fix the past. But it entered the room honestly. A month later, the Hargrove Medical Foundation sign came down from the building on Michigan Avenue. Reporters gathered again. But this time Maya did not enter through the service elevator. She stood at the front entrance before the cameras, wearing the silver butterfly brooch over her heart. Behind her, workers unveiled the new name, the Rose Bennett Children's Fund. For the first time, her mother's name belonged to marble, sunlight, and something no one could erase. Maya did not give a long speech. She told them Rose had been a young nurse who believed sick children should never have to prove they were worth saving. She told them Charles had tried to repair his silence too late, but his final evidence had restored what greed tried to bury. Then she announced that every recovered dollar would return to pediatric care, and that the first new scholarship would go to children aging out of foster care who wanted to study medicine. Hello, au finance. After the ceremony, Olivia Chen approached Maya near the lobby flowers, holding the hand of a little boy with solemn eyes. She looked exhausted and ashamed. "They threatened my son's treatment," Olivia said before Maya could speak. "Vivian's people said his grant would vanish if I remembered anything in court. I'm not asking you to forgive me. I just needed you to know I was a coward, not a liar by choice." Maya looked at the child, then at the woman who had failed her and suffered for it. The old Maya might have accepted the apology too quickly, desperate to keep anyone from leaving. The woman she was becoming understood that compassion did not require self-erasure. "I know you were afraid," Maya said, "but fear still hurt me." Olivia nodded, crying silently. Maya placed a folder in her hands. "Your son's treatment is funded, not because you stayed silent, because he is innocent." That evening, Maya drove alone to the lake, where Chicago's skyline burned gold against the water. In the passenger seat lay Charles's final letter, read so many times the folds had softened. "My daughter," he had written, "I let shame and family pressures steal years from us. I cannot ask you to forgive a dead man. I can only leave you the truth and hope it reaches you before their lies do." Maya sat with the window open, wind moving through her hair, the butterfly brooch warm beneath her fingers. She thought of Rose, young and frightened, carrying a baby away from a family powerful enough to erase her. She thought of Charles, too late, but not entirely silent. She thought of herself in that courtroom, stained with coffee, watched by people waiting for her to break. They had pitied her because pity was easier than seeing her clearly. The next morning, a photograph appeared across the city's front pages. Not the old one of Maya in a stained dress. Not the cruel image Sienna had fed to reporters, but a new one, Maya Bennett Hargrove, standing beneath her mother's name, while sunlight struck the silver wings on her chest. The headline called her the woman who saved the children's fund. But Maya did not need the headline to tell her who she was. She returned to her office, approved 3 more emergency grants, and placed the butterfly brooch in a small glass case beside the first donation receipt issued under Rose's name. Beneath it, she wrote 1 sentence on a white card for every visitor to read. When they pity you, let them underestimate what grief has taught you to carry. Then Maya turned off the display light, walked toward the waiting boardroom, and opened the door without asking anyone whether she belonged.